Okay, Board Member Wells, we are live. We may call the meeting to order.
Okay, calling it to order.
For the record, this meeting is called to order at 6:35 p.m. For our members of the public attending remotely and in person, we just want to bring your attention to the public notice on our agenda. To access the meeting remotely, join from a PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or Android device using the URL. If you do not wish for your name to appear on the screen, use the drop-down menu and click on rename to rename yourself to be anonymous. To request to speak, use the raise hand icon on the screen. To join by phone, dial 1-669-900-6833 and enter meeting ID 890-0783-8093. If you wish to comment during the public comment portion of the agenda, press star 9 and wait to be recognized. This being the second meeting of the month, we'd like to bring attention to our new planned acknowledgement, which can be found on the second page of our agenda. I'll now proceed to roll call. Starting with Vice Chair Wilson.
Here.
Board Member Buzzwell-Chartrell.
Here.
And Board Member Wells.
Here.
And for members of the public, we did receive a leave of absence request for Board Member Chair Alfano, who is absent in tonight's meeting. With that said, the board is the constitutional quorum would be 2 members to take vote at tonight's meeting, given that the quorum is being calculated out of 3. That said, on behalf of ODPA staff, we have our investigator Daniel Weinberg, our data analyst Saeed Mehdi, and myself, acting director Murillo. On behalf of BPD, we have Lieutenant Coates joining us here in person, and then I see Arlo Malver joining us remote. With that said, we have a quorum, and we could proceed to our next item, approval of the agenda.
We have folks presenting for or coming in for 9A,
Yes.
9B. And that's it.
That's correct.
All right. Is there any objection to moving 9A and 9B above items 5, 6, essentially that we go to them right away? Because take Chief of Police's report, take item 7, and then go to 9A and B, and then go back to the agenda so that we could do the substantive stuff first.
Yep.
Okay, that's my motion.
So we would be moving items 9A and 9B before item 5.
Well, we'll do items of 1, 2, 3. There's a missing, and 4. Then we do item 7, Chief of Police's report. Then we go to 9A and B, and then come back to the agenda.
Okay. Do we have a second to that motion to approve the agenda with those changes?
I'll second that motion.
Now roll call, Vice Chair Wilson,
Yes.
Board Member Wells,
Yes.
and Board Member Buzzwell-Chartrell.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries. Okay. We cannot proceed to public comment. As a reminder, speakers are generally allotted up to 3 minutes, but maybe allotted less time if there are many speakers. They may comment on any matter within the board's jurisdiction at this time, except confidential personnel matters. With that said, I'll start with folks who are present in the room before I move on for virtual attendees. Okay. And when you're ready, 3 minutes are on the screen.
Okay, my name is Kit Sagamore, and I have spoken on this matter before, but I'm bringing it to your attention again tonight. I find it deeply discouraging that the BPD and the city council seem to think that we have in the federal government people who are law abiding and who are not looking to abuse law and not looking to disobey law, when in fact we have folks in the federal government who do both of these things. So it is really discouraging to me to see more policy being promulgated that pretends that putting words on a page saying, oh, this can't happen, will keep it from happening. And what I'm talking about, of course, is ICE or other malign federal agencies getting access to the surveillance data that Berkeley is planning to add to it. As an example, on page 91 of tonight's packet, it says the chief of police will report any request from federal immigration authorities, vendor, or any non-local agency to access data for federal immigration enforcement purposes within 10 days of receiving the request. This assumes, right, that the chief of police will know that these data are being accessed or requests are being made, when we know for a fact that there's something that exists called the FISA warrant that people like, never heard of it, that allows the federal government to very, very legally go to a person like an employee in FLOC and say, this is a warrant. The law says if you tell anyone about this warrant, you could go to jail, you could go to prison. If you tell anyone what you have given me in response to this warrant, you could go to prison. But you must give me these documents or you could go to prison. That's how a FISA warrant works. I was actually at a meeting last year when a Berkeley official of the city of Berkeley actually said, language in a policy does not ensure compliance. And yet, here's Berkeley Police and the Berkeley City Council in many cases saying, oh, look, we put language in a policy to say that won't happen, so don't worry your pretty little heads about it. If I may, I would like to give something I've written to members of the dais about this particular issue. There are, of course, also the possibilities that okay, thanks, I don't have anything copied, you may take whatever's left over. There's also the possibility, of course, that the plot will give information to the federal government on the sly, not without a warrant, or that somebody would be, paid money, basically. I mean, we have a completely corrupt federal government. We mustn't continue to pretend as if there are people in power at the federal level who actually respect justice or the safety of people living here.
Thank you. Seeing no additional members of the public, we'll now move on to our virtual attendees. Six now. Will the speaker with virtual meetings, you've been granted permission to speak.
Thank you.
3 minutes.
My name is Wendy Alfson. I'm here on behalf of the Berkeley Friends meeting to support the Police Accountability Board and its continue to advocate for its recommendations to be adopted by council with regard to all of these changes proposed by Berkeley Police Department. With regard to the specific ones on tonight's agenda, the proposed language that replaces the prohibition is exceedingly broad. In both cases, the video fixed cameras and the drones, UAS, I hope that you will adopt language that either opposes the proposal altogether or extremely significantly narrows it. The exemptions to the restrictions or prohibitions in use that are cited in the proposed drone policy mean it's effectively restricts nothing. Since we can use it for pre-planning and we can use it for exigent circumstances, as well as any number of actual occurrences, leaves very little off the ground. And as the previous person said, it merely has our policy is that you don't look in people's backyards or look at people. No, and even the prohibition against targeting people, it says only, and so they can add any other adjective and then it makes it okay to target people on the basis of their skin color, race, age, sex, etc. So I know you have a hard job, really want to commend you all for it, and we support you. Thank you.
Thank you. And Vice Chair, at this time, we have no additional hands raised. We could move on to the next item.
Okay, let's do that. Approval of the minutes,
I move to approve.
a second.
Are there any objections to the motion to approve the minutes? Seeing none, the motion carries. Okay, Chair, we can now proceed to Chief of Police report, given the agenda order change.
That'll be me.
Okay,
Chief Lewis and Deputy Chief Tate apologize, unfortunately their schedules didn't allow them to be here tonight, so. They asked me to share a few things that are, going on and also, are going to be sharing, some comments here with them. So just for cases of interest, we can go through a couple of cases on the 6th. We had officers respond to a disturbance in the area of College and Bancroft, where Letty Man was seen in front of Berkeley there. And another person may have had a knife. When officers arrived, they found a male in his 40s who had a laceration above his eyebrow. They learned that the victim had been robbed of some artwork on College Avenue and managed to follow the suspect there at Bancroft and College. But during that time, the security guard there at Berkeley Hall also tried to intervene. And the suspect ended up lighting a Jewish scroll on fire there inside of the facility. So officers arrived, they were able to arrest somebody. That person has been charged by the district attorney's office with various crimes, including robbery, arson, vandalism of some religious property with some hate crime enhancements, I believe. Then on the 13th, officers responded to the area of Martin Luther King and Prince Street for a report of an auto vehicle and pedestrian collision. So a vehicle versus pedestrian. The pedestrian was walking in the crosswalk when he was struck by a vehicle. The pedestrian was transported to a mobile hospital. He was in critical condition. He's going to have to go through several medical procedures based on his injuries. The driver, when officers arrived, noticed several indicators that he was impaired, and he performed poorly on his field sobriety test as they went through the DUI investigation. So officers that night arrested him for felony DUI and causing injury while driving under the influence. So the district attorney had office last week also charged that person with felony offenses related to the collision. One of the other cases that we may have seen recently in the news is on the early morning of the 23rd, several armed suspects came into Berkeley in a vehicle and burglarized at least 7 commercial businesses throughout our city, which is now detectives are working on it. It may relate to several other burglaries that occurred in neighboring jurisdictions, and our detectives are actively working with them to identify suspects that relate either to our cases and how they connect to the other cases. So our regional issues, so we're working closely with them to put our cases together. Some business prevention tips we just wanted to offer for folks is obviously, if possible, I know it varies depending on how people have their businesses set up, but try to not have cash registers visible. Possibly don't keep cash in there, keep them open and empty. Consider maybe signs that say no cash, on the premise when you leave at night. And then also, we recommend, if you can, alarms and then good security systems with cameras. All those things can help if there are a victim of a crime to help us track down any of the needs. For staffing, we are currently at 154 officers. That includes 10 that are currently in the academy. So we have 3 that are just started the academy at Alameda County. And then just, of note, they wanted to let us know that, eligible for, we have 22 officers that are eligible to retire this year. So, they're working hard on, recruitment and, working on trying to maintain numbers. Personal recruiting, so we're really hard to get quality candidates for us here in Berkeley. So, that is all I have, and then Arlo has some updates for you guys as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lieutenant, and good evening, everybody. I just wanted to give a little bit of context to our public safety technology plans that we've been talking about with the board. As you know, over the past couple of weeks, we've submitted a number of policies to the PAB and to the city attorney's office for review, and this is in preparation for the March 24th council meeting, where we'll be bringing an item that asks council to approve the regulatory documents and contract amendment authority needed to continue and enhance our public safety technologies. So those technologies are LPRs, fixed PTZ cameras, drones, and community video streams, as well as an analytical platform to collate those streams with our existing databases and records management systems. So what that means operationally is that when a call for service comes in, the workflow is in place to simultaneously dispatch a drone to the scene for aerial video, pull up nearby ALPR hits and fixed camera feeds, check community registered cameras for relevant angles, and then cross-reference that information all from one platform and get that information out to officers in the field in real time. The department will be recommending a single updated master services agreement with Flock that includes a number of really strong edits and additions from the city attorney's office after close review and engagement from them to add strict sanctuary city and data protections and privacy protections that align with our values and policies as a department, as well as the city's values and ordinance or in city's ordinances and state law. Only two technologies I kind of want to emphasize here that are new. That's drone as first responder and community video streams. Everything else is just a renewal or a policy update for technology that council has already approved. And that has gone through extensive legislative and community engagement processes. And we do recognize that of all these technologies, community video streams may be the one that the PAB is least familiar with. So we're happy to continue to receive questions and work with the PAB liaison to discuss that in the same way that we've done regarding drones with Board Member Wells, which has been a really productive set of conversations. And then this part is I think, an important one here. We're proposing to fund these acquisitions through a permanent reduction of 6 officer positions. So this is a real right sizing that reflects what technology can do and what we believe it can do. So at about $290,000 in salary and benefits a year, 6 positions would generate about $1.75 million in savings a year, which is enough to cover both the DFR contract and the LPR renewal, with a net savings to the general fund in excess of $1 million a year. And so, like I said, that reflects our belief in that we can do more with fewer traditional enforcement positions by investing in these tools. So that said, this is still working through the budget process with the city manager, and ultimately the final decision rests with city council. So hopefully that adds some helpful context as you're considering these items later on in your meeting. Like I said, I'm happy to continue to receive questions in the way that we have. And if there's any quick high level questions, I'll try to answer them now.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. can we just go over again? So ALPRs, what we have an existing contract with Flock for what exactly?
For LPRs. And so that is up in July. So we'll be bringing in an item just to renew that contract.
Okay, and what about fixed cameras?
So fixed cameras, as you know, we've gone through the SDO process with those. That was approved. The final step is just authority to sign a contract. And so we'll be bringing that item.
The authority to sign the contract is coming forward on the 24th as well.
Yeah,
And this is with Flock.
correct.
Okay, and am I correct in kind of recalling that that process has been delayed because of concerns about Flock sharing data with ICE in other jurisdictions?
That item was delayed. We were asked to do some additional research into other vendors and into the experiences of other agencies with Flock and with other vendors. So we've done a lot of that research, spoken with a lot of people, and determined that we are confident that the protections that we have written into this updated MSA and our policies are the best protection available to us. That the experiences of other agencies were due to settings that we have properly set, and we're not due to any breaches or policy violations by Flock. So, and then in addition to that, this vendor is the one that with the best product that's going to provide the best public safety value to the community, and that our subject matter experts in-house have recommended to us.
Okay, and then the 1.75 million annual in savings for the 6 positions, you're saying that that's sufficient budget to cover ALPRs, fixed cameras, drones. I don't know if there's costs associated with the video streams because we haven't looked at it yet.
The video streams are free to the city. The camera owners pay for that integration. The fixed cameras already have a allocation dating back from the original referral. And so yeah, for DFRs in the ALPR renewal, that salary savings is enough to pay for those products and then return an additional $1 million plus to the general fund.
Okay, I'm sorry, just having trouble hearing you. It's enough to pay for the ALPR and the drones because the fixed cameras are, the budget's somewhere, has already been allocated.
Correct.
Okay, and then my last question is for this MSA that you indicate the department's confident about the protective factors delineated in that agreement. Is that something that we're gonna be able to see, or are we just gonna see it when it gets submitted to council?
Yeah, it'll become public through the council agenda publication process. So about 2 weeks before before March 24th.
Okay. So 2 weeks before March 24th would be March 10th. And we have a PAB meeting on March 11th, right?
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. It's 19 days, so March 5th. Looking at the calendar.
Oh, March 5th.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so interim director, can you make sure to put that on our agenda for March 11th?
Yes.
The MSA for the fixed camera.
And to be clear, the MSA it governs all of those technologies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just other questions, sorry. Other questions?
I got some.
Yeah, go ahead.
You got something? I do. You go first though. Thanks, I appreciate it. Can you share the city attorney's opinion of using Flock as the primary vendor for all of your technology recommendations?
Their role is to
You're on
review
mute.
I'm on mute.
You were.
You were.
Keep going, it's fine.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the city attorney has engaged in a pretty deep process with the vendor and their MSA, and taking a look at that language to make sure that the city is properly protected from any legal risk resulting from our sanctuary city ordinances, our policies, state law, and really to get Flock their incentives aligned with complying with those things. So there are financial penalties for breaking those terms, and opportunities for us to leave the contract by breaking those terms. So we really built in strong protections that I won't speak for the city attorney, but that certainly they've made as many suggestions as they felt necessary, and Flock has accepted them all.
And can you speak to the vendor criteria that you and Lieutenant Bonaventure worked through to sort of arrive at Flock being the preferred vendor? Like, what was the process or the criteria?
Yeah, well, at a high level, we wanted to work with a vendor that was amenable to working with our city attorney's office on those terms, and make sure that we had the right protections in place. And in fact, going with a single vendor for multiple technologies makes that process a lot stronger, because now we have a single MSA governing all of our technologies instead of negotiating separate MSAs for each one, right? And then the same goes for the audit trail. There's a single log of access across all these different things, so that makes our auditing process more robust, and so from that perspective, it was a strong choice. But the biggest thing is the products that Flock are offering here are the only ones that are fully featured, that meet our requirements for effectiveness, that have every piece that our officers feel necessary to really get the public safety value and resource multiplier effect that we believe is possible. There were some vendors that had certain pieces, but no other vendor put it all together in this way.
Okay, and then I just have one more question, and that's just related to the cost. Do you know what the cost is on an annual basis?
So, sorry, the cost is of what?
The cost for specifically, I think, our drones as a first responder system. Like, what is that cost?
We'll be asking for authority to enter a contract not to exceed $750,000 over 3 years. So those are totals. But we'll be presenting that Flock has offered a discount if we are able to confirm these purchases in March.
That's all I got.
You said 7 positions that would essentially 6. Okay. And is it the case that those 6 would come at the expense of like the ideal police? Like, we have X number of slots, right? And so we're now saying that, and right now we are far from whatever that number is, correct?
Correct.
Right. So we're just saying that whatever that ideal staffing scenario is, we're committed to 6 less of it because of the use of this technology.
Yes, it goes a little bit further than that, because we're already budgeting, and again, this is a process that's ongoing with the city manager's office and council, but we're already accounting for a certain amount of salary savings, and so this is on top of that. This is new money that we'd be giving up. And yeah, so to answer your question, I think ideally we would have both, but given the realities of our current staffing situation and the technology available
Yeah.
to us now, that this is a trade-off that we as a department and the police association also has determined is worth it.
Right, but it's not, you are not saying that you are gonna hire 6 less people next year because, again, you're still whatever. I don't know what that
Yeah.
figure is, right?
Our top authorized number will end up being 6 below what it would be otherwise, which actually,
Got it.
given that the number of salary, additional salary savings we might hit sooner rather than later.
Okay. And I apologize for this, I just don't remember you guys bringing it up before, but what was the other technology that was referenced? It was like community cameras or something like that?
Community video streams, yeah, and we submitted the surveillance technology ordinance documents associated with that. But like I said, I'm happy to sit down and talk with.
Can you just tell me just high level, like what it is?
Yeah. So essentially, those are cameras that a business, for example, owns already, and then they elect voluntarily to connect that video stream to the police department so that in response to a specific call for service and investigation, that we would be able to access that video stream directly and in real time instead of canvassing for that video after the fact like we do now.
And this is a technology which will be part of, like, Flock is facilitating the ability to do this.
Correct. And so that way our analysts and officers can see where that video feed is available to them. And so as we're responding to an emergency in real time, we can pull up that video feed in order to gain that situational awareness to determine what exactly is going on and the response needed.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're ready to move on to 9A.
We are.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody. And we do have one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Arlo.
Thank you, Arlo.
So we'll be going on to what was scheduled by the 9A. We have the city's budget manager here joining us today. We'll be giving a presentation, we can transition to slides, and get started. So just one moment. And give the opportunity to, or on this side, just so that we're more centered, but I have slides. Let me just share screen. These are the most recent ones, so. Yeah. Okay, so.
Good Lord.
Good evening. My name is Mara Quantified and I'm the budget manager for the city of Berkeley. And I'm here to briefly present to you budget overview. Can you go to the next slide, please? So the agenda is we're just gonna go over really quickly what a budget is and some key terms. Some situational overview of where we're at. A recap of our fiscal year 2026 mid-annual budget update. Then we're gonna move on to the 2027 and 2028 budget, which is the budget that we are developing right now. We're gonna then move on to other fiscal challenges, some of our budget balancing plans, next steps, and of course, Q&A and questions. Next step, please. So budgeting terms, a budget is essentially a financial plan that reflects the city's policies, goals, and priority. So for the city of Berkeley, we adopt a 2-year budget, and so what we call that a biannual budget. When we say the term fiscal year, that is usually a 12-month period of time. We start July 1st and end July 30th. Right now, we are in fiscal year 2026. Revenues are how do we pay for our personnel, services, programs, and projects, also referred to as our funding sources. Expenditures are the what, like what the budget is spent on, referred to as uses. Proposed budget is the financial plan that outlines our anticipated expenditure and revenues for the biannual budget. And this is developed and submitted by the city manager to council. And that typically happens in May, which is coming up. And then an adopted budget is the actual budget that is formally adopted and approved by the city council. And that happens in the last council meeting in June. In this particular biannual budget process, it's June 30th. And we typically are given 2 opportunities to amend or revise our budget after it's been adopted. And those are called an annual appropriation ordinance amendment 2. And they're lovingly called AA01, which happens in November, December, and then AA02, which happens in May. So those are the 2 times where we can revise the adopted budget in June. Appropriation is an authorization granted by council to make expenditures and to incur obligations. So it's set by funding level. So what that typically means is that let's say we adopt $100 million budget and we set a spending limit by fund. So general fund is $10 million, zero waste is $10 million. So that's what we mean by it's set by the funding level. We are required by law to adopt a budget that is balanced. So that means that our planned expenditure must be equal to or less than our planned revenue. The city of Berkeley has over 200 funding sources. The general fund is the most discretionary, and it has the ability to support other funds that have fiscal issues. Thank you. Situational overview. So we have been relying on one-time resources and actions to balance our deficit for many years now and to implement new initiatives. Some of those one-time actions have been through vacancies, meaning we either have a hiring freeze or we use assumed salary savings. We have transferred money from other funds into the general fund. We have used some of our fund balances and reserves. We've had one-time resources. ARPA is the most recent one. During COVID, when we received about $60 million from the federal government. And then project deferrals, meaning capital projects had to have been deferred. The reality is, in summary, it's our expenses outpace our revenue. So in personal finance, we spend a lot more than we take in. Our goal for this biannual budget and beyond is to adopt a balanced budget that is focused on sustainable long-term solutions and really minimize our reliance on one-time measures. However, we do recognize that such measures cannot be entirely avoided. We just don't want it to be our default go-to when we're developing a budget. Next slide, please. So here's a quick recap of 2026 annual budget. So we had a deficit when we were building the 2026 budget of $29 million. And here's a good example of what I meant when I said that we have relied on one-time measures. In order to adopt a balanced budget in 26 and figure out how to go from 29 million deficit to a balanced budget, we had an increase on our revenue of $7.5 million. We used a section 115 trust, which is what the city uses to pay for unfunded pension of $6 million. We used some of our workers' comp budget of $5 million. Our IT cost allocation general fund budget of $6 million. Small science reallocation of $2.5 million. And we froze 44.4 vacant positions. All in all, balancing our budget, so we were able to adopt a balanced budget in 26. So where are we now in fiscal year 2026? So what you're looking at is the ODPA budget for fiscal year 2026. What was adopted was $1.15 million. Revised, and this is what I meant when I said that we have 2 opportunities to amend or revise our adopted budget. So the revised budget now for ODPA is $1.43 million. And actual is $971,500 of what's been spent of the budget.
Can I just ask on that one, have you done a projection to see what you expect we would expend by June 30th of this year as compared to the revised fiscal year budget?
No, but I believe we are at about 60%.
I think that's about the number, yeah.
Yeah, so we're at period 7, meaning the end of January. It's slightly on track to where it should be. And 100% of ODPA's budget is general fund.
Okay.
The next slide is the fiscal year 2026 police department budget. So the adopted budget for 26 is $106.24 million. Revised is $109.73 million. And our actual is $66.67 million. Again, that only goes through period 7, although period 7, aka January 2026, is not yet officially closed. And also, the VPD's budget is 88% general fund.
Can we go back to ODPA? I'm just looking at the split between personnel and non-personnel costs. It changed quite dramatically, and it's looking actually like at this point this year, there's been more spent on non-personnel than personnel. What is the cause for the jump between fiscal year 26 adopted and revised? And then why would we see like, looks like 51 or 52% of expenditures year to date have been on non-personnel versus personnel? How would that be explained?
So, are you looking at actuals?
Yeah, there's quite a jump in the revised budget if you look between adopted and revised on page 6, but then also when you look at actuals, that proportional split between personnel and non-personnel is like very off from budgeted.
Yeah, so for the revised personnel, that typically is due to contracts that were entered in the prior fiscal year that got automatically rolled into the 2026 budget. So sometimes we go into multi-year contracts, right? And so it's not quite fully spent in that fiscal year where we encumbered it. And so there's a balance left, and that will then automatically go into the next fiscal year. For example, like Jose, I'm not sure if you can think off the top of your head, an actual contract that you entered into in 25, and then it got encumbered and rolled into 26, but for your non-personnel budget revised went up from 240 to 575,000.
Yeah, the big one would be the rent for the space, that, like, in terms of our just non-personnel funds, that makes up, I wanna say it's somewhere between 170 to 180,000 a year. For this particular space, when you factor in janitorial services, we also had to get our whole IT set up in here, so that's sort of what excludes that big one-time expenditure that we had off the front.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the 400 something thousand, we're seeing 494, you're saying is associated with. This still looks off to me, because my understanding is the lease is like 200,000 a year.
It's 170 to 180.
So like, how would we have spent 500,000 this year already on non-personnel? I'm just curious what that would be.
I'd have to do a breakdown of just more detail of the budget.
Wait, but isn't it the case, sorry, it wouldn't be the case that the 575 is what we're expected to spend in
No, I'm
20?
sorry, we've spent 494.
94, sorry.
Yeah, almost
Yeah.
500,000 more than we spent on personnel costs
Yeah.
so far this year.
Just for additional context, it also depended a lot on our staffing. We were using a contractor to fill in some of our temporary roles. So expenditures that would have been recorded in our personnel were actually being recorded in our non-personnel.
Are they? Because usually temp help is in personnel. Contract help is recorded in non-personnel.
Yes, because it now becomes either miscellaneous professional services. So it's shifted from the personnel budget and shifted to the non-personnel budget, because now you're going into a contract that is no longer on personnel, because personnel is typically a city function, city of Berkeley employee. And so if we are using outside consultants or outside employment agencies, then that would shift to non-personnel.
Would legal services factor into that?
Yes, then that would be non-personnel as well.
The question that I have, and it doesn't need to be answered here, and it's just because I'm still relatively new, is just getting an understanding of how do we define non-personnel expenses? And then to know what all expenses is going into that bucket would help me understand where the 490, why we're at the 494 number.
And that's something that like, on behalf of the office, we could like break down and
Yeah.
give just what that, what the baseline was at the beginning of the year, just so that we can sort of explain it better, yeah. As we move forward with it.
I don't want to derail your presentation now.
So the next slide is, 7.
You did that one.
The UPD
Yeah.
budget, okay. Let's move on to the next slide, please. So now we're moving on from 2026, and I just want to briefly talk about our, the budget that we're developing. Right now, it's just fiscal year 2027 and fiscal year 2028, and so briefly, again, as I mentioned, the city of Berkeley has over 200 funds. So our baseline budget, for now, for the biannual budget, all funds is $832.2 million in fiscal year 2027 and $848.1 million in fiscal year 2028. Next slide, please. So how are we gonna build a baseline revenue really quickly? Actually, tomorrow we are getting an updated revenue projection for the general fund. If you have time, you can tune into the Budget and Finance Policy Committee meeting at 10. Our finance director is going to be presenting updated general fund revenue to be provided tomorrow. But for now, we built our baseline budget. We had used numbers that are, we were projecting $297.2 million of general fund revenue in 2027 and about $302 million in fiscal year 2020. But again, that will change tomorrow. Next slide, please. So how we built a baseline for 2027 and 28 is that we, in the past, we had just copied prior year adopted budget and then just used that as our baseline. But what we did was we looked at prior year historicals to look at actual spending patterns. And we use that as our baseline for this annual budget. We're hoping that that is going to be a better and more accurate budgeting. And it's something that we're trying differently this year. In terms of personnel baseline assumptions, we did include a COLA in 2026 to reflect current MOUs for miscellaneous. There is no COLA reflected in fiscal year 2028. However, that is subject to change, depending on the current labor negotiation outcomes. We've included step paybacks, all of the app pays, all of the increase in health benefits and pension costs. All vacant positions have been budgeted at step 1. And positions that were frozen in 26 are not budgeted in 27 and 28. And we also right-sized our overtime and hourly budget.
A question for you. Is there any sort of process or mechanism that is in place to be able to control expenses across departments? Because if you're copying budgets from one year to the next year, but if you sort of look deeper into some of the line items and expenses of legal services, business services, and use of contractors, is there any sort of process where departments are being asked to make cuts to be able to control costs rather than just keep doing the same thing year over year?
Well, that's why we've changed it out a little bit differently when we built the baseline, and we actually looked at spending patterns from the last, I believe it was 3 to 5 years, 4 years, something like that, 4-year median average. Just so that we're not just copying year after year. And then I'm also gonna go in a couple of slides about our budget reduction exercise we're doing for the moment, so but thank you for asking that question. We are trying to put more systems in place
Mhm.
for accountability.
Mhm.
Next slide, please. So for 2027-28 biennial budget, this is just baseline, again, baseline is just the starting point. This is all gonna change because we're gonna go through propose and then whatever's adopted right now, it's really what you're looking at right now. But for 27-28, this is only for general fund. $329.44 is in 2027. And about $225 million of that is personnel, or 68%. Of the general fund, and about $105 million is non-personnel, about 32%. And if you look at fiscal year 2028, our baseline for the general fund is 335.6. In terms of percentage wise, is the same exact as 2027, 68% personnel and 32% non-personnel. And this holds true historically, it's always typically a 70-30 split between personnel and non-personnel. And our leading drivers obviously are salaries, pension, health benefits, insurance, OT and hourly. And I was gonna go very briefly because it's been going longer than expected, so I just wanna be mindful of your time. But for the baseline personnel for general fund, this is more of a breakdown of what I talked about in the previous slide, this is just the personnel. So again, for 2027 and 28 in terms of percentage, it's about the same, salaries are 51% of the personnel. Pension is the second driver, is 26%. Health and retirees at about 11%. Overtime is at 6%, workers' comp at 3%, and other personnel costs at 3%. And it's pretty much follows the same pattern as in fiscal year 2028.
Do you see any of the categories on the non-personnel side growing over the coming years? Like pensions, for example, with a number of folks from the city retiring?
Well, pension is under
Personnel.
the personnel
Okay.
umbrella. But non-personnel typically would just be contracts, and, you know, because of inflation, we typically say maybe 3% increase, but we just don't know anymore. And next slide, please, so here's a good example of the major cost driver is pension. I just wanna point out that in 2025, our adopted pension budget was 51.8. And if you see in 26, it shot up to 56.3 million. And then it went up another couple of $1 million in 27, and then another million in 28. And these are things that, there are certain things we have control over and there are certain things we don't. And pension is one where we don't have really any control over, we just have to find the money for it. Overtime is another cost driver. I do want to point out that this is not, I don't want people to think, oh my, like that was $14 million in 27 and 28. Now we're increasing our overtime budget by a lot. And this goes back to how we right-size our baseline and how we build our baseline budget, right? We had this, again, typically, positive would be just a copying prior budgets. But this year we looked at actual expenditure, we're like, what, this is ridiculous, we need to budget accordingly. So for example, in 2024, our actual overtime for the whole city was 14.1 million. And in 2025, it was $15.9 million, so as you can see, we've been under budgeting. And so all we did was just right size that for 27 and 28. So this is not health insurance, it's just insurance, our liability insurance, and it's the same story as in the overtime. We just looked at spending patterns or what our actual expenditure have been, and we just right sized it for 27 and 28. Next slide, please. So this is the general fund status at baseline level, and so kind of putting it all together, the revenue for 27, that was 297 million. Personnel is about 224.5, non-personnel is about 105 million. So as you can see, our total expenditure at the baseline level is 329.4 million. So we are currently looking at a deficit in the general fund of $32.3 million. And in fiscal year 2028, the same story, just different amounts. The revenues at 302 million, personnel to 29.4 million, non-personnel at 106.1 million. Total expenditures at 335.6, with a projected deficit of $33.2 million. Again, these are the baseline level, the revenues will be updated, by the end of this month. But this is what we're looking at currently, and this is what we went when we said that we are moving on to reduction phase of our budget.
Police department might be giving you $1 million back.
And so there are other budgetary pressures, it's not just the general fund, so we do have other funds that are in trouble. Again, we have grant funds that are reliant on federal and state, and that is currently volatile right now. So we're keeping an eye on that. We have some enterprise funds that are either having a structural deficit or already have a negative fund balance. Same thing for our internal service funds. Our capital improvement fund, which is the funding source, the discretionary funding source that funds our capital projects. Behavioral Health Services Act transition, which is in fact impacting HHCS. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we have a labor contract negotiations currently happening at the moment. We have unfunded infrastructure maintenance currently at about $2 billion. And then last but certainly not least is our external factors. Economic uncertainties of federal and state budget changes. And unfortunately, unpredictable events that can come locally, state, national, or local, that we have to pivot should anything happen. Next slide, please. So in closing the deficit, our path forward, we have been working on, every single department in the organization has been working on a budget balancing strategy. We had asked departments to provide us with a 10 and 12.5% reduction from their baseline for the general fund. And that was something that people have been working on January and February. And this applies to all of the general fund. However, departments that manage other funds that are also in structural deficit are also working on a balancing strategy. And then we'll also ask departments if they have any revenue generating ideas to move forward and provide that to us as well. Continue to next slide. So next steps, again, January and February, we have been doing a budget balancing strategy. That's really been our main focus for the last 2 months. It's been quite difficult. Imagining a 12.5% reduction in your budget, it's not fun. We're also launching a 5-year CIP. And again, the 2027-28 revenue projection is gonna be updated. We had a great webinar on the 3rd. I mean, you're gonna meet today to go over the budget, and then we're having a labor management meeting tomorrow in the afternoon. In March, we are going to then take all of this reduction proposals and revenue generating ideas and kind of refining the biannual budget to see where we're at. And then we're gonna finalize the reduction proposal. And in April, so the city manager is going to finalize the proposed budget and 5-year CIP in April. And in May is when the city manager will go to council to submit the proposed 27-28 budget. We're gonna have ongoing labor meetings, and last but certainly not least, on June 30th, 2026, the hope is that we are going to adopt a balanced budget at 11:59 p.m. Because it has to be adopted by June 30th. So that is where we're at. We did provide a form to employees for our budget balancing ideas because everything is on the table. As you can see, in the situation that we're at, we are not shy in asking for assistance if anyone has any wonderful great ideas to balance the budget, and we are more than happy to get that from you. And there's going to be several, we're gonna have another webinar, a free webinar in spring. And then we have a bunch of budget and finance policy committee meetings coming up. And one of that is happening tomorrow. Okay, thank you so much. I know that was a lot and I try to go as fast as I could.
This is helpful.
So let me pause and if you guys have any other questions.
I have a couple of questions to other board members.
Go ahead.
So Jose, where are we with ODPA's submission of its 12.5 reduction?
So that deadline, we've already submitted it. We have the 10 and 12.5. That's been submitted. That's something that we could distribute to the board so that we could review that as we're like moving forward in the next steps of the budget. We were able to meet those requirements, primarily cutting back, and it's just what I remember off memory. For example, participation in what would have been like staff training, like NACO webinars, the NACO conference. In one proposal for the 12.5 specifically, one of the proposals was to potentially observe PTO days within the office, which was the voluntary time off. That staff could either just take an unpaid day off during that day or use accumulated comp time, which is what we usually do instead of overtime. We're, for example, at a meeting here tonight. And of course, just cutting back on supplies based on historical expenditures. For example, our office supplies is the one that I think of the most because we were allocated originally somewhere like in the $5,000 range. That was sort of an average due to the transition to this space. But based on what we had actually spent year to date in the last fiscal year, we were able to make cuts in like various areas to that. And even just maximizing the space, like for example, parking room or like parking pass gets charged to each department. For the director, the space has a parking lot. That's money that we don't need to spend and allocate. But certainly share those around. I can't make it public just because it has some of the, for example, all of staff's sometimes, so just like breaking it down, but we could get you a version of that.
Okay, great. And one of the things I was surprised about is to learn about the lease for this space. I think as we discussed, it's about $170,000 or $80,000 a year. I was surprised to learn we have this entire floor. There's very few staff. And I was really surprised to see that the city had signed a lease for this space for 10 years with no apparent termination provision. I'm wondering if part of what's come up in the budget discussions is looking at these kind of facility issues citywide, looking at potentially breaking leases or approaching landlords, because I think it's clear like this is really way too much space here, for example. Has that come up at all?
That is on one of our generating ideas of budget balancing, which is to kind of reassess city properties and also city leases. And that is something that is we're gonna tackle it. There's just so much right now, we're just focusing on the reduction proposals, but that is on one of the levers that we're trying to assess, take a look at for sure.
Okay, and then one of our charges is to weigh in on BPD's budget, and so I'm trying to understand the timeline for that. I see in here that the finalized reduction proposals when releasing the proposed budget is supposed to happen in March. And this question also for you, Jose. I'm not clear when our review would happen. This would be after the department submits its proposal for 27, 28. Then we would have the opportunity to review it and weigh in. What time frame are we looking at for that?
I want to say just based, I'd have to like review more details because we have specific timelines that were shared to us. It would probably be in that March once we have a clear picture of what the revenues and proposed baselines would be. And then fitting in within that timeline, but I'm not sure if there's more insight.
Yeah, so right now we are just the proposed budget is supposed to go to the full council in May, right? But then April is when the city manager is putting it all together. So that so that it can be ready for the May meeting.
Mm.
And so we're thinking realistically, maybe end of March, early April. Would be that frame. And so I'm not sure where we could squeeze that in terms of your meetings. I think it's the second and fourth Wednesdays.
Yes.
So we could figure that out, but that's when approximately, it wouldn't be before. The earliest would be the last one in March, earliest.
Okay, so when we did this the last time, we worked with somebody in the city manager's office, I can't remember her name. And we were able to work on this kind of outside of this meeting structure
Okay.
when the department submitted its proposal. So since ODP has submitted its proposal to the city manager's office, correct? Then does that mean the BPD has as well already? It's 10 and 12.5% proposals.
Yeah, so then, the departments have provided their 10 and 12.5% proposals already.
Okay.
But right now, we're just looking at everything in totality, and we're not quite sure yet, which ones are gonna move forward. So we're not ready yet to present that to the, because we're still trying to put it all together. And so like I said, the earliest would probably be March.
Okay.
But we could certainly, have a conversation about it. I'm not sure how it was done in the prior process. And you were here already?
Yeah.
When that happened? Okay.
Yes, but he wasn't the director, so he wasn't so involved. I think we can look at our charter authority, because I believe it gives us the authority to review BPD's proposal, so not necessarily what the city manager is approving.
Okay.
So, because the point is to have the opportunity to weigh in at that stage.
Okay.
And so I'm a little concerned about the timing, but we don't need to take more time on that now. I think that's something we can work on after the meeting.
Yes, please.
Okay,
Go ahead and
great.
send that to me. I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions on the budget? Okay, thank you.
All right,
Thank you so much.
Okay, we'll move on to 9B.
All right, and we
Okay, we need to take 5 minutes.
we'll just do a quick break during our transition to the next item. We will be back shortly. Okay,
We have some guests as well, right?
yes, we are back and our guests are joining us remotely. Yelena, if you're ready to present.
Well, hold on a second, because I don't know, Board Member Wells, were you aware that we had the presenters? I'm not sure that we communicated this well.
No.
Okay, so the structure that the chair came up with is at our last meeting, we had the department present on drones and present their proposal. At this meeting, we were gonna hear from UC Berkeley's Center for Criminal Law and Justice, sort of their ideas or their take on the issue. So we're gonna kind of get a well-rounded set of views.
Okay.
Then what happened is we asked you if you'd be willing to meet with the department after the last meeting, and you did. And so
Okay.
you have a lot of information to share. So is it your preference that we start with you or start with the Berkeley folks?
I will start with the Berkeley folks.
Okay, all right, then I think that was the plan. Thank you.
So we could, Yanina Numan, are you there?
Yes,
Okay.
we cannot, yes, we're here. We cannot start the video, but we're both here on the call.
Okay.
Now we're able to.
That might have been me.
No worries, no worries. It happens. Thank you so much
Okay, so the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having us here. My name is Yanina Lipara. I'm the Administrative Director of the Criminal Law and Justice Center. And with me is my colleague Imam Maftaz, that she will introduce herself later on. I wanted to start with explaining the Criminal Law and Justice Center serves as a hub for research, education, and advocacy. We are here today because we have the aim to support community oversight of police technology deployment decisions and also the implementation of best practices in the deployment of emerging technology. So with that aim, the Criminal Law and Justice Center started working already in the past and with the Office of the Berkeley Director for Police Accountability. Already last year, we have presented to you the findings that we have for the use of computer voice stress analysis and also for the use of AI for the purposes of police report writing. My colleague Iman next will be then presenting to you our findings for drone as first responder in line with the policies presented to us, the draft policies presented by Berkeley. So thank you so much, and Iman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anina. Good evening, everyone. Thanks again for the time. I'm just going to quickly share my screen because we do have a bit of a presentation here. Please let me know if you can see this.
Yes, we have 5 physical copies. Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay. Can I just confirm what's showing now, Anina? Do you see?
The
See
speaker
slide
notes.
with speaker notes.
Now we
Okay.
see your notes. Now we don't.
Okay, that should not be what's happening. Just a second, sorry. Just stop share quickly.
If you want to start, Iman, I can try to share my screen.
Okay, yeah, that might work because it's going to shift back and forth. And
Yeah,
then,
it's fine. Yeah, go ahead.
okay. Okay, and yeah, you can give me the go ahead. Okay, perfect. There we go. Okay, so good evening, everyone. I'm the technology policy analyst here at the UC Berkeley Criminal Law and Justice Center. My name is Iman Maftah. The Office of the Director of Police Accountability requested that CLJC conduct an independent policy review of the Berkeley Police Department's proposed drone as a first respondent program. Tonight, I'll walk you through what we found. So I'll just go through the presentation and we'll leave some room at the end for questions. Next slide, please, Anina. All right. So before I get into findings, a word on how this review came to exist. And I'm sure many of you have some background on this, but I want to provide a little bit of context to sort of anchor this presentation. The Berkeley Police Department submitted a proposal to acquire a drone as a first respondent program, a system in which autonomous drones are dispatched directly in response to 911 calls. Under Berkeley Municipal Code, any acquisition of new surveillance technology requires BPD to first submit a surveillance acquisition report for public review. The Police Accountability Board, exercising its oversight mandate, requested that UC Berkeley Criminal Law and Justice Center conduct an independent policy review of BPD's proposals before any approval decision was made. Our analysis is organized around 6 focus areas the Office of the Director of Police Accountability identified in the October 2025 memorandum that was shared to CLJC. These 6 focus areas include empirical verification, so evaluating the factual basis for claims about safety, response time, and staffing efficiency using peer jurisdiction data and academic research, policy and civil rights analysis, civil liberties analysis, transparency and oversight framework, cost and operational modeling, equity and community impact, and comparative benchmarking against peer jurisdictions. We assess BPD's proposal against each of these 6 criteria to determine whether that standard was met. In this presentation, I'll cover our methodology, the empirical effectiveness or lack thereof, the fiscal and policy gaps in BPD's proposal, the constitutional and equity risks, and finally, CLJC's formal recommendation to this board. Our full written report will be submitted to the Police Accountability Board in the coming days, but tonight I would just like to highlight the findings that are most relevant to your discussion. So let's start with how we conduct this review. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so our review rested on 3 methodological pillars. Firstly, an empirical effectiveness analysis. We examined benefit claims proposed by BPD, peer jurisdiction, and technology vendors, including response times, crime clearance, and de-escalation against publicly available information, including drone deployment and crime data from peer jurisdictions and peer-reviewed literature. Secondly, we did a policy analysis. We reviewed BPD's proposed use policies, oversight structures, and cost frameworks highlighted in policy 611 and 709, and compared them against peer jurisdictions, specifically Chula Vista and San Francisco. And we did this in order to identify critical safeguards that Berkeley's proposal currently lacks. Third, we did a legal and constitutional review. We analyzed Fourth and First Amendment limitations and state law to examine judicial risk. I want to flag one really important limitation up front, and you'll see that on the slide. This report draws on publicly available data and secondary analysis of department drone flight logs. The clearance rate comparison I'll show you in the next few slides is descriptive and not causal. The trends we identify may reflect differences in policy, time series changes, concurrent interventions, not drone deployment alone. We are flagging this pattern because it raises important questions that Berkeley should answer before deployment, not necessarily because we're asserting that drones cause the outcomes. Similarly, a lot of this technology is in its early stages. It was rather difficult to build this kind of robust empirical study because a lot of that data just isn't accessible or reported on, which is just another note to take into account as we build out these policies in the next few years. Okay, with that context, let me tell you what the evidence actually shows thus far, beginning with our recommendation. Next slide, please, Amina. Okay, CLJC's primary recommendation is that the City Council reject BPD's drone as a first responding proposal in its current form. This recommendation is grounded in 3 independent findings. First, there is no of the program's cited benefits, including improvements in safety, de-escalation, and staffing efficiency, are not supported by peer-reviewed research or evidence from other jurisdictions. In fact, as I'll show you shortly, San Francisco's quasi-experimental data trends in a different direction. Second, the program carries some constitutional risk. The potential for First and Fourth Amendment exposure is well documented. Moreover, in nearly every jurisdiction we reviewed, mission creep has occurred. That is, deployments have expanded beyond their initial scope with limited oversight. Third, BPD's impact statement does not account for ND AA and FCC compliance issues affecting 3 of its 4 proposed drone models currently as it stands. It also overlooks sanctuary policy conflicts tied to flock safety software, as well as life cycle costs, data storage, and maintenance requirements. The fiscal analysis, as it was currently presented, is materially incomplete. If council opts not to reject the proposal outright, we have outlined a staged conditional framework to address these deficiencies. I'll walk you through that at the end of the presentation. At this moment, I'll walk you through the underlying evidence behind each of these 3 concerns. Next slide, Anina. All right, so here we're just looking at the perceived claims and benefits of a DFR program. So this slide compares common benefits claims of drones and first respondent programs with what actual evidence shows. So let's just kind of walk through these claims. Faster response times. This is one area with real support. Drones are often arrive 3 to 5 minutes faster than patrol units. In Chula Vista, for example, 47% of drone deployments reach the scene before officers. This matters, especially in search and rescue cases or active shooter situations. This is an important variable. Enhanced situational awareness. We rate this as moderate. Drones are consistently useful in high-risk scenarios. That's well documented across peer jurisdictions. The issue is how situational awareness is defined. Policy 611 permits drone use for high-risk or critical incidents, but leaves both terms undefined. It provides a sort of a non-exclusive list of examples, of 13 different examples, but the ultimate decision rests with the watch commander. We've seen how this plays out in other jurisdictions. For example, in San Francisco, drones were deployed for over 5 hours at the Pride Parade, at the Dolores Hill Bomb skateboarding event, and on 3 different occasions at the Outside Lands Festival. None of these instances were emergencies. They were flights that were justified under the similar policing language of situational awareness, and similar language to what Berkeley is using currently. Improved crime clearance. There's no evidence. We'll cover this in the next slide. We built out a quasi-experiment that shows currently we need some more information to make that determination. Crime and violence reduction. No peer-reviewed studies have found a causal link between drones and crime reduction. The declines cited by San Francisco Police Department began before drone deployment and matched citywide trends in other jurisdictions of crime reduction. De-escalation and use of force. Evidence currently is anecdotal, and the Berkeley Police Department cites a few isolated incidents. However, there's no systematic data that shows this is the case. Operational efficiency. Agencies report that drones can resolve certain 911 calls without dispatching ground units, but this is mainly based on self-reported perceived evidence, not validated performance data. Cost effectiveness, still unverified. There's no independent audits that have been conducted amongst peer jurisdictions, and I'll walk through physical uncertainties later in the presentation. And we can move over to the next slide. Okay, so this is the San Francisco Police Department's clearance rate data showing 2 periods, before drone deployment 2023 to 2024, and after 2024 to 2025, and 2 groups. This is the treatment group, which includes robbery, assault, burglary, where SFPD deployed drones at a higher rate, and the control group, which includes rape, arson, larceny, where drones were deployed at lower rates. The columns show percentage point changes in absolute clearance rates, each period. Here's what we found essentially. The treatment group mean began at 3.3 percentage points before deployment and increased to 3.9 percentage points after, which is a net change of about 0.6 percentage points, essentially flat. Drone deployment produced no meaningful acceleration in clearance rates. The control group mean was 5.9 percentage points, but that's driven entirely by arson, which swung from about negative 1.6 to 17.9 percentage points. Arson is considered a low volume category where a handful of cases moves the number dramatically. So this is more noise than it is a signal. Now, I do want to point out here, because this is really important, this is descriptive. not causal. We cannot say drones cause clearance rates to stagnate. There are alternative explanations. It could be crime type, composition, reporting delays, prosecutorial standards, and other concurrent interventions. So this is really not a controlled experiment. But I think the absence of supporting evidence is in itself informative. It's rather difficult to pull standardized drone deployment data from the different jurisdictions. The best available peer jurisdiction data shows no meaningful clearance signal in high drone categories. Currently,
Can
no.
you stop real quick?
Yeah, can
Yes.
you stop, because what we're looking at, I can't see the screen, so I'm looking at the handout.
Yeah.
And the numbers, that we have do not at all match what you're saying. So
Oh.
like, for example, in the
Mhm.
treatment group for robbery, we have something that says pre-drone, for robbery plus 12.1%.
Yeah,
And then
that's
it says-
sorry, that's incorrect. I sent an updated version of the report to Saeed just before, a couple hours before the presentation. So you should be looking at an updated version.
Yeah, okay, so I think we should, this is very important and we don't have the right data.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
and we cannot see the screen, so that's not too helpful to us.
Okay.
Maybe we can go on to the costs, and I don't know, Saeed, if you're able to just print the, I don't know if this is an issue with other slides that you updated that we're gonna get to.
Primarily it was just this slide. The other ones just maybe have some
Okay.
languaging changes. But
Now that you blew it up. Okay, so what does the, that's a little too big. What is the plus 3.4 PP? What does that mean?
so it's just showing the year by year change of clearance rates for those specific crime categories. So between 20 and 23, the year over year change was 3.4 percentage points. And then between 2024 and 2025, that raised to 7.11 percentage points. So it's just the difference of that change. It's the acceleration of the change there.
Okay, so for all categories, the clearance rate went up post-drone.
Except for assault.
Except for assault.
But even assault, I'm not understanding how this works, because it's plus 4.33 and then plus 0.06. So what's the decline?
So the decline is happening after. So again, also it's when I say that it's not a causal determination is important, because drones essentially were implemented in San Francisco May 2024, but this covers an entire year essentially. But here what you're seeing is between 2023 and 2024, there was an increase of clearance rates for assault, but then between 2024 and 2025, that decreased by 0.6 percentage points.
Oh, so the 0.6 is supposed to be a negative?
No, it's still essentially it's increasing, but it's increasing at a slower rate.
I
When
see.
Yeah.
So they're all increasing, but they're increasing at different rates.
Correct. And I think,
Post.
yes.
Yeah.
And I think essentially, yeah.
Okay, so then can you scoot it over now to the control group?
Yeah. Well,
Okay, so the control group, you're saying have less drones, or how do we define the control group?
Yeah, so the control group, this is just based on manually pulled drone deployment data from San Francisco Police Department. So one issue that we ran into was standardization. So even the languaging, they were standardized differently. It could be person with a gun versus person W/gun. So we kind of had to manually group those different languaging. But what you see on the left is the top 5 reasons for drone deployment. And then the control group is drones that were used sort of at a lesser degree than those top 5 reasons.
The drones were used, they were still used
Yes.
for rape, arson, larceny, but
Yes.
they weren't used at as high of a rate.
Yes, not as frequently as the crime categories on the left.
Okay.
Yes.
So is there a need to do the distinction between like treatment and control, or could you just compare 23-24 to 24-25? Since drones were used for some of these, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, yeah, the point here was just to show that there really is a lack of data on this, and there isn't a very strong causal inference between drone deployment and higher clearance rates. So I think that's really just kind of the point of this study, because there are a lot of limitations for the study. One, it's a very short time series, and the data isn't standardized, but it's really just to show that there isn't a strong causal link.
Okay.
In one city.
Yeah,
This is just.
this is where the
Yes,
data is
San
available.
Francisco is the only city that provides drone deployment data by crime category.
Got it. Can I ask, when you made this recommendation, was it based off of the data analysis that we had that is now we know incorrect? Like, in other words, it looks like the change was even less pronounced, right, for high drone deployment. The other data makes, it would seem to me, a more compelling case, even though we've acknowledged there's kind of causal holes here.
Yeah, I think
It seems to make a clearer case for the efficacy or the lack of efficacy for drones in high deployment situations. Whereas your new data, to the extent that we can draw any conclusions, makes a stronger case.
yeah,
right?
definitely. Yeah, no, I agree. I think this one's just a little bit more methodologically sound because it's using absolute numbers versus what I used previously was actually an amalgamation of the San Francisco clearance rates as well as trying to match it with other clearance data that San Francisco shares, which I wouldn't have been particularly accurate. So this is kind of more just like a standardized measurement of the different changes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think what you're saying is for the high drone deployment group, pre-drone clearance rates on average went up year over year 3.3%. And then post-drone 3.9%. So it's a modest impact in the high drone deployment. These may not be statistically significant. Then in the low drone environment, you have a 1.2% year over year clearance rate increase versus a pre-drone and a 7.1% year over year increase post-drone. But there's noise in that data from arson. That's my reading.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway from this is just that there is no causal inference, right? That's showing that drones have categorically resulted in sort of this increase in clearance rates among these certain crime categories that are where drones are frequently used.
Right, and it sort of predicated on this assumption that we're monitoring and care about clearance rates. And one of our challenges, I brought this up a number of times, we don't even report regularly on clearance rate. As far as I see, nor have we set goals for clearance rates. So I think it's great to see this analysis, and I'd love to see it for us. But
yeah.
Did you folks have other questions on that data, or can we move on? Okay, so let's go to the next slide.
Okay, we can go to the next slide, Nina. Okay, are we good? I just want to preface this slide by saying that we've obviously just gotten some new information regarding the budget for or the costs around these technologies from Arlo. So this is based on just policy 611 and 709. This is what we received. So we made an analysis predicated on that information. So this, I'm assuming, might change once we get sort of like the finalized version of what the costing is going to look like for these technologies. But maybe we can just kind of go into the things that are currently not disclosed in the policy documents that we received. So definitely a big one here is that there is an omission of sort of LTE or cellular infrastructure costs. Axon data storage and future drone fleet replacement are not accounted for. So really critically, three of BPD's 4 proposed drone models, that's DJI Avatar 2, Matrice 4T, and 42D, now appear on FCC's covered list, introducing regulatory uncertainty that may require early replacement with NDAA compliant alternatives, which prove to be more expensive. So there just really isn't an analysis of that risk or those transition costs included in this policy. Secondly, vendor exposure is also unaddressed. ACLU investigations found flock safety systems shared data with federal agency, even when prohibited. Oakland's data was accessed in 2025 despite sanctuary protection. BBT's proposal currently doesn't include sort of those contractual safeguards, but it sounds like those are in discussion. Finally, Chula Vista's salary absorption funding model, quite structurally similar to BBT's based on what we know, failed within its initial year, forcing the city to allocate $1.5 million annually before committing Berkeley needs a complete and independently validated costs model. But it sounds like that's currently in the works. And so that's on this slide. We can turn to the policy gaps. Hey, Nina.
When you say salary absorption model failed, what do you mean? Do you mean that similar to what we heard this evening? There was a plan to fund this equipment via by holding positions vacant or eliminating positions, but then the city ended up adding them back or filling them?
Yeah, so essentially with Chula Vista, what initially happened is they were training current police officers that couldn't be in the field due to injury, as well as sort of an asset seizure fund. But because their program expanded so quickly, as we've seen with many other jurisdictions, they just weren't able to sustain that model with that current salary absorption fund or
They
model.
can afford funding to scale it. You mean that they weren't able to fund the scaling of the drone?
Correct. It scaled incredibly fast, so they just weren't able to sustain that kind of scaling.
So in a situation like that, did Chula Vista just shut down their drone program?
No. Instead they invested more. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The FCC issue, it's come up a couple times. I'm trying to look at this. It's very hard to, I'm just on the website trying to understand this. So, where do you find that these 3 products are on this covered list? If you have that actual link or site, I think that'd be very helpful.
Sure.
Because that does seem like, a problem if in fact these 3 are. I don't see them on here, but I don't really understand how to look at this.
Yeah, I can definitely share that with you. This happened at the end of last year, so I think it's pretty early on. There was a document in the FY 2025 NDAA that said that this year, going into this year, that all foreign-made technologies would be under the FCC covered list. So I'll send you that link. But currently right now, those 3 models are being absorbed into that covered list. And it's not that they can't use those technologies, they can. But I think where the issue arises is replacement costs in case there's damage. There's also just replacement after the 3-year period. What's that going to look like? Because they can't continue after 3 years. You won't be able to purchase these technologies if things remain as they are after the 3 years.
They won't be.
Okay, all right.
And then we can move to the next slide and try to get through this quickly. Okay, so this is just a quick condensed policy evaluation. So currently policy 611 includes real strengths, and I think that's important to note. That's past a lot of peer jurisdictions. There's a use is limited to 13 emergency scenarios. Trained BBT staff must operate the drones. excuse me, deployment require approvals from the watch commanders, chief and city manager. Non-evidentiary footage is purged after 60 days, and the public transparency portal is required. Importantly, targeting based on race, religion, gender, identity, or economic status is prohibited. These are commendable safeguards. However, there are 5 critical gaps we've identified. First, there's no outcome metrics. There's no defined success threshold, pilot review process, or sunset clause. The council cannot assess effectiveness or terminate on performance goals. Secondly, there's no vendor data controls currently in the policy. Policy 709 omits limits on Flock API access or federal sharing. Oakland experience shows that this is not just a hypothetical. Third, there's no audio recording protections. There's no standard for microphone activation or prohibition on incidental audio that could potentially create legal risk. Fourth, there's no sanctuary compliance. Sorry, is there a question?
No.
Okay, sorry. There must be an echo. There's no sanctuary compliance. The policy does not integrate Berkeley's sanctuary protections into vendor contracts currently, but it sounds like that's in the works. And fifth, there's no equity guardrails. There are no limits on per neighborhood flight frequency, per census tract limits, no demographic tracking, and no tools to prevent disproportionate deployment. San Francisco Police Department data shows drones concentrate in lower income, high minority areas, and nothing currently in PBD's proposal prevents the same happening here. And lastly, on mission creep, the pattern is established across peer jurisdictions. San Francisco flew 78% of its drone missions for property crimes, not emergencies. And Las Vegas will expand their coverage to 24/7 surveillance this year. That's only 15 months after its initial conception. So absent hard constraints, emergency use language becomes permissive over time, and it requires a lot stricter guardrails around that. And then the next slide. Yeah. Okay, and then we'll do quick summary of sort of the constitutional and legal risks. A big one is the First Amendment. In 2017 and 2018, drones were deployed over protests in Berkeley and Richmond by Alameda and Contra Costa County Sheriff's Department. And Electronic Frontier Foundation analysis found these missions were logged under vague safety justifications, obscuring First Amendment implications. Entries disproportionately documented left-leaning protest groups while omitting counter-protest activity. Berkeley Police Department itself also requested drone support during the 2017 protests. Currently, Policy 611 does not prohibit or regulate drones' use at constitutionally protected assemblies. On Fourth Amendment grounds, the Supreme Court has ruled that thermal imaging of homes and long-term location tracking constitute searches requiring warrants. BPD proposes use of Matrice 4.2 and 4.2D models, both thermal capable, but currently Policy 611 includes no activation thresholds or residential oversight safeguards. This does raise some constitutional concerns. And then lastly, on equity, as I mentioned, San Francisco Police Department drone data shows a clear concentration in low-income racialized neighborhoods. Berkeley's proposal includes, again, no census tract caps or demographic logging or disparate impact review. Without these safeguards, Berkeley could have no mechanism to detect or prevent inequitable deployment patterns. So let's move on to show you how BPD's proposal measures against ODPA's memo's 5 focus areas. Go to the next slide. So based on ODPA's core evaluation criteria, here's this is where BPT's proposal stands. Empirical verification, currently that's unsubstantiated. Claims around clearance, safety, and staffing lack peer-reviewed support. And then secondly, policy and civil rights. There are some gaps that need to be addressed. No audio recording prohibition, no vendor data controls currently, no sanctuary compliance laws. Verbal assurances from the police department must be formalized. and policy must bind future administrations as well. Transparency and oversight. This is partially addressed. The 14-day portal and 60-day purge exceeds peer norms and is a strong policy, but there's no flight level reporting, demographic tracking, or independent audit protocol. Cost and operations. Currently, there's still omissions around LTE infrastructure, data storage, fleet replacement, and of course the NDAA compliance risks. Equity and community impact. Again, this is largely unaddressed in the policies. There's no safeguards against disproportionate deployment. This is a critical gap, especially in light of San Francisco Police Department's spatial patterns. This brings us to our recommendations. You can go to the next slide. So as it stands, we recommend that the City Council reject PBD's DFR proposal in its current form. The constitutional and fiscal risks remain unaddressed, and key cost disclosures are incomplete. These are foundational gaps, not details to fix after procurement. Interior drones, those are capable of entering enclosed spaces, should be categorically prohibited regardless of the council's position on the broader DFR proposal. Currently, there's no substantiated safety cases, and the civil liberties risks are rather high. If the council chose not to reject the proposal, CGC proposes a three-stage conditional framework. Stage 1 is a risk assessment, so independent constitutional analysis without the vendor, equity impact model based on San Francisco PD's drone patterns applied to Berkeley, full life cycle cost disclosure, including FCC and NDAA compliance risks. Stage 2 is a bounded pilot, so strict 12-month limit, which is just tier 1 emergencies only, which include violent crimes, fires, search and rescue, no property crime deployments, cities controlled data storage, zero vendor access, third-party access prohibited. This includes automatic sunset clauses and council reauthorization, deployment caps, and demographic logging from day 1. Stage 3 is a success metric. Adopt binding evaluation criteria before pilot begins, response time, warrant compliance, deployment equity, and cost effectiveness. Metrics must be built into procurement, not added on later, because as we've seen, that's caused some issues when it comes to tracking the efficacy of this kind of program. So why this structure? Peer cities like San Francisco and Chula Vista launched programs before setting these clear rules. As a result, scope and costs expanded beyond original plans. Berkeley has the opportunity to learn from those areas and build in accountability upfront. So we can go into our final slide, and I'll just do a quick summary of the request to the Police Accountability Board. We're currently asking the Police Accountability Board to formally request 5 critical actions from BBD before this proposal advances to council. Which probably won't be the case since it's pretty current, but things that to think through and think about is an independent cost benefit analysis, a full cycle fiscal analysis that includes NDA, FCC compliance, LTE infrastructure, Axon storage, fleet replacement, and flock sanctuary law exposure. This must be conducted by an entity with no financial ties to DGI, Axon, or flock safety. DGI compliance disclosure, a supplemental memo detailing FCC covered list, designation for DGI Avatar 2, Matrice 4T, and Matrice 42D. This must include cost estimates for replacing these models with NDAA compliant alternatives. Codified vendor restrictions, written contract provisions, barring data access by Axon and Flock with automatic contract termination for any sanctuary law violation, which sounds like BPD is currently working on. Binding success metrics. Outcome thresholds must be adopted by ordinance before any pilot begins. They must be integrated into procurement specifications, not added retroactively, to ensure the program can be measured, evaluated, and if necessary, sunsetted. And finally, equity safeguards. Per census tract deployment gaps and demographic flight logging. Without these protections, Berkeley will have no mechanism to detect, let alone correct the kinds of spatial disparities already observed in other jurisdictions. So just closing here, Berkeley really has the benefit of hindsight. Other cities have launched drone programs before they knew the cost, the impacts, or the scope, or the manner in which they would scale. San Francisco, Las Vegas, Chula Vista. CLGC's position is clear. The public safety case for DFR has not been demonstrated. Until it is, constitutional risks, fiscal exposure, and equity concerns remain of concern. We asked the board to transmit these 5 requests to BBT and to condition any council approval on the 3-stage framework we've outlined. Thank you, and I'll take any questions at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Really excellent. I don't know, board member Wells, if you want questions, or I think maybe go to your information, and then we kind of, I don't know if you guys can stick around because it would be really helpful to be able to.
If we could send this document to them.
Yeah, to dialogue with you after you hear what board member Wells is gonna report back from his discussions with the police department, if you have time. Okay, great.
Great.
Go ahead.
I had an opportunity to meet with Arlen Hauberg and Lieutenant Bonaventura yesterday to sort of cover a range of questions from the board, the city council, and the public related to their drones first responder program. I think for me, the big takeaway from your presentation is that the gaps that you identify, especially around like metrics usage, are some of the same, I think, opaque gaps that I've identified. And what I will say in my discussions with them is that I think there's an opportunity to sort of really, I think, clearly define the metrics that they want to use for success in a more clear and I think concrete way. Sorry, so now actually I'm gonna go to my notes. You guys really need this document.
Yeah, do you have it?
Yes.
He had it.
Maybe you could send
Yeah.
it to them.
But yeah, I mean, it's just like, I'm sorry because this document would be helpful, but there's like 18 questions that we went through. And some of those questions were, what are the goals? How are they measured? Like I understand from their point of view, there's an argument for the use of drones and the efficiency of resource allocation. And I think we all agree in theory that that is possible, but I think in reality, it's like, what does that really look like? And for me, it's just like the first question that I come to, even just off of your presentation, is under what scenarios would a drone be sent out for? And for that to be, I think, a more concrete answer, like, is it home invasions? Is it rapes? Is it missing persons? Or is it special circumstances? Like a shooting, for example. And I don't have a clear answer for you because I haven't really been given a clear answer. And so I think that's where there could be some support to sort of arrive at metrics that are in alignment with their goals and what is also in alignment with our goals as a board and what's in alignment with the city council from a public safety perspective. This second one is also the cost, which seems to be a very ambiguous answer that hasn't been concretely answered. And I think that's another area that it would be, I think it would just be really helpful to understand, like, what is the actual cost? What are the reoccurring costs? Is there a real cost benefit analysis? And like, just what are all the things that need to be taken into account, even if it's something as simple as the long-term viability of the drone, and at what point will these pieces of technology need to be replaced, and what will that potential cost be? And I work in tech, so I know what they're making today is not going to be what they make in 3 years, and it's not going to cost the same. I think questions related to staffing resources, as example in Chula Vista, I think is a real concern. Because I think drones can only do one thing, which is it can be first on the scene to observe a situation, but I think any situation that requires police resources is still gonna require human police officers to respond. And so I do question the efficiency of resources, I think in real world ways. I think the other thing, and I understand that there's a lot of concern around Flock as a company and their history, their reputation. And to a large degree, I also feel like if BPD has a criteria and a framework of how they're assessing vendors they should have the right to be able to select the vendor that they think is best going to deliver on the services that they need for the tool to actually execute. I think where it gets a little bit ambiguous is because it's not clear what metrics that we're actually targeting to ensure that the program would be successful. As a result, it's also not clear within the vendor selection, like how do we decide Block over the other three that were considered if there's also like no hard criteria as to what we're assessing based on the actual technical specs. And so it leads me to the conclusion that because Flock has all of the technical requirements and it's widely adopted by other jurisdictions, that it's become the default vendor as opposed to the right vendor for our needs.
So those are some of your key takeaways.
Yeah, those are some of my key takeaways.
I do think, that interim director, we should make sure to get this posted.
Yes.
Because it does, include questions that have come in from a number of places and it's great to have them answered. Do you have any questions or comments, board member Westfield Churchill?
Yes, yeah. I feel like your summary just now, is, perhaps more, you're more skeptical about this, proposal than I feel like there isn't, so much a kind of like, whatever, board member Wells's take as we see here. It's more just kind of like, here's my summary of what I was told. So I guess my question is, again, the sense I'm getting is you're a little bit more skeptical about this intervention, but is that not fair?
Yeah,
And then what would be your?
I'm not skeptical of the program. Like I understand the argument for the program in a number of ways. I'm skeptical about how will we measure its success. Like it's one thing to have a drone. It's one thing to have drones. And it's another thing to say that by having drones, we're going to be more efficient with our resources, or we're going to be more successful in sort of the vague metrics. That's the part where I get skeptical about. But my skepticism is more rooted in let's find a path that we can all agree upon that is concrete and actually measurable, as opposed to I don't really think we need.
But do you think it would, absent those metrics, do you think it would be wise to go down this path?
Yeah, I think so. I genuinely don't have an opposition to drones. And I think I say that from, like, I've gone on several police ride-alongs and I do them at night.
Yeah.
And so there's an operational component to it that I understand. There is a department of retention standpoint that I understand. I think there is a skill development of adopting technology to just have a current police force. Whether or not do we have the kind of crime on a regular basis that the drone program that they're proposing is needing? Probably in certain sections of the city, yes, whereas in others, probably not. But I think, but for me, what I would what I would challenge the department on, which is sort of the fundamental question I keep asking is, it would be clear to know the chief's position on public safety and the role that technology plays. And with this drone program, what types of crime are you looking to address as a first responder, and how will we measure the effectiveness of it? And I think my sense in the conversation that I've had is that I think they're trying to figure out how to get there, and they just haven't gotten there.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like from there, and I can't remember, was it the last meeting that they presented?
Yes.
I felt like the last meeting, they kind of touched on a lot of, I mean, they didn't say specifically like, we expect to see these particular outcomes other than the one that they seem to actually be holding themselves accountable to, which is a commitment to reduce staffing, right? But there was kind of like anecdotal, here's what one would expect, right? Like we would expect a shorter time between when a crime is reported and when we're able to diagnose the situation, because drones are able to get there much more quickly. You would think they talked about being able to essentially like more quickly assess whether in fact it requires police resources, right? Like all of these kinds of things which one could, so again, it was kind of like anecdotes. It wasn't, we expect X, Y, and Z. We expect changes in these following categories.
So here would be my personal response to that. When you go on a ride along, it's one police officer in one large area. And if they get a call, whether it's a legitimate call or not the best use of time, that police officer is being taken into another part of town, and then another area gets neglected. And if there is the issue where they actually need support, then you're pulling 2 or 3 other police officers from other parts of the city to deal with that one thing. And I remember on one ride along, maybe it was 11 o'clock at night, there was a crime, it was an issue, the dude had to go to the hospital. We sat there till 4 o'clock in the morning because we had to get a statement from him. And so there's nobody covering that officer's area for that period of time, or you're asking officers to stretch themselves to be able to do it. So in instances like that, I can understand where a drone would be useful.
Because the drone is gonna take someone's statement.
Not because the drone will take someone's statement, but because if there's a call and it turns out to not really need a police officer's presence, sending a drone over there to be able to assess that is an efficient use of time, so that you're not having a police officer to go over there and do that while something else can be going on in their area. That, I think that's my example.
Yeah.
Okay, I have several questions, but I guess I would say what I find kind of interesting is the city's in a major fiscal crisis. It's not actually until today that we were told that the department is willing to give up 6 positions in order to fund this particular investment. I'm going to, I haven't done it, but add up the aggregate cost of the fixed cameras, the ALPRs, the Ambus drones, and just see what has been added to the BPD budget from technology purchases alone, all without any express articulation of what the expected outcome is. Not with any one of those purchases. We have not established set expected response time reductions. We have not set goals for clearance rate objectives by crime category, nothing. So I believe this is a really irresponsible use of public dollars, period. A hard stop. So I find it interesting that you would say, yes, you would support it even without the articulation of expected performance objectives, because we do not live in a violent city where we've got to have all hands on deck to bring in all military equipment that's possible to control the chaos that is in the town. We don't live in that kind of town. So we should expect of our department that they're going to articulate the empirical rationale for why we are continuing to make these investments. So that I think is a really significant issue for me. I do believe that drones are here. So, like, I'm struggling. I don't think we need them. And I don't like the idea that we're gonna buy them so we have the same bells and whistles that other departments do, so that police officers want to come work here because they're gonna have all the toys. Like, that doesn't feel good to me, but I recognize there's a reality that technology is creeping into the way policing works. And so I'm willing to step away from, I don't really think we need them, to like, let's assume the city's gonna do this, let's do it in the best way possible. I'm willing to go there, but for me, that includes metrics and being very clear about the cost. Because the costs that we've gotten, they're not even the same in the multiple places in the different documents that they are. The numbers do not match up. There's not clarity that's being provided about costs, let alone the issues the Berkeley people have raised. So that's my statement about it. But my question for the Berkeley people and also for you, Board Member Wells, I'm curious if this came up. I was having a really hard time understanding policy 709, policy 611, policy 1303, and this impact statement, how they relate to the statutory legal obligations that we have, which we call AB 481, how they relate to the charter or the municipal code. So what I got to at the end of the day is that policy 709 is supposed to satisfy the state requirements AB 481 lays out. One of which big initial thing is, do you justify the need for this equipment? That's in state law. What is the need for the equipment? Have you done it? It's supposed to be in policy 709. So I don't think they've really done that. And I think we should hold them to that policy 709 needs to meet statutory requirement and outline what the need is. Then I understand 611 is the use, like authorized use. And I think this is an issue that you raised in your presentation, that we're pretty loose on what the authorized use is. We don't do it by crime category. It's kind of open.
It's ambiguous.
And it may, right, and you phrase that as well. So that may be another area that we say, we've got to fix, you've got to fix this. 1303, I can't even remember right now what it is for. Is that something you're aware of, or you, Lieutenant? Because that is the other policy that we got to look at in association with this. Oh, data surveillance and privacy. So 611 is deployment in the field, and 1303 is what's happening with the data. Did you look at policy issues at all for any of your work when you looked at peer jurisdictions, or did you just kind of look at drones as first responders separate from the policy?
No, we definitely, in the report, we have an extended section on sort of like a jurisdiction by jurisdiction comparative review on their policies. And then from that, that's in the report.
Yes,
Yes.
Did we get the report?
not
Or we
yet.
just got the
Not
data.
yet. You'll be getting it in shortly.
Okay, all
I
right.
know. There's a lot
Okay,
more
that's
information.
wonderful.
Yeah.
And did you find anyone, because one of the things is, when I'm looking at these, there's lots of circular references. 709 references 611, which references 1303, which references 709. When I look at best practices, it's not to do that, like just my little research. It says, 709 should be the comprehensive document that satisfies the AB 41 requirements, and you should avoid circular references because it's confusing to keep track of. And maybe 611 and 1303 could be combined. Did you come across anything like that? Like there's better ways to put this all together?
I think that's a really good point. That's currently something that's not in the report, but we can definitely take a look at to add. I think we kind of run into the same issues as we were kind of gathering all this data, is that it's so disparate, and there's so many different places, even for one jurisdiction, where they house that kind of data. But we can definitely look into that and see if there's more of like a standardized report that houses all these policies, because I agree, I think that'd be really useful.
I guess that's my take. We should absolutely do metrics. We should get clarity around the use. That's currently out articulated in Pulse 611. We should get clarity around cost, fully loaded, true cost. And maybe I think bring up this FCC issue. It's an interesting issue. If you send us the link so we can verify that, then I think that's a legitimate issue. And then I have these sort of like recommendations around how this is all put together in a way that promotes transparency, ease of being able to update it so you don't have circular references, and perhaps 2 versus 3 policies might make it simpler. Those are my thoughts. Because I kind of feel like this is what council wants to spend its money on, the department does. I don't know if we're gonna stem that tide.
I don't think we are, but like I said, it's just like, I think where they need help is, I think it is clear measurable goals, clear use of how drones are going to be used. I think it is incumbent upon them to explain to us, given the nature of crime that is in this city, in what cases or situations would drones be deployed, and how would we measure the effectiveness?
Yeah.
And then I think the next step to that would be, based upon the vendor criteria, you know, is Flock the best criteria? Is the program that's being recommended a sufficient amount, or is it too much?
What I got from Arlo on Flock is kind of like, it's the only game. I guess there are these other vendors, but it sounds like they are far inferior. I mean, that's kind of what he's saying.
Yeah,
So
they are the industry standard, but I also think some of the logic that Arlo is working with is, if we use one vendor, then we can integrate and standardize a lot of systems and integrate it together, which makes it easier for him to manage it. And then there's also a financial benefit to that.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. One recommendation that we made was also to make a risk assessment. And the reason for this is that having Flock as one provider and the systems integrated has great benefits in short term, but it may also have a big risk long term if the systems are not working, or the police learn to rely only on these systems and this vendor for everything. So this is why we also suggested that there is a risk assessment made, also integrating this part into this analysis, because the cost could be greater at the end if this is not observed or at least analyzed.
That's really true. It's kind of like those of us that have suffered through Oracle ERP or certain system deployments where then like you've integrated it, you've done all the work, you have it, and then the license costs jack up so exponentially and you're stuck. You can't get off of it because the transition cost is too high. So I think that's an excellent point. Even just from a cost perspective, there's a risk with giving one vendor all your business and relying on them so extensively. Yeah, it's a great point. Anything else? So it sounds like we're gonna get a report. Our next step is at our meeting on the 20, whatever it is,
11th.
next meeting. We are gonna have to vote, I believe, on our formal position that we're gonna submit to the council on this. I'm sure our chair, he's coming back soon, right?
Yes, next week, I believe.
Okay, I'm sure he's gonna want to heavily weigh in, so I will check with him. It seems like something, obviously, Board Member Wells, you should continue to work on, likely with him. This kind of final recommendation that would come to us. I'm happy to support as well, although I think that would be a quorum. And when can we expect to get your report?
So we're aiming to have it done by the end of this week, but end of this week, early next week.
Maybe send it what you have by the end of the week, even if you put like a draft water stamp on it, because it is super helpful. I really appreciate you doing this. It's great. And even to see like the little bit of clearance rate data that there is, I mean, it would be incredible to be able to do this for Berkeley, like 3 years from now, like what happened with drones. So thank you so much.
Can I ask one last question? Are there, I was struck that there isn't any academic literature that you cite. Why is that?
Well, in the report, there are a couple documents that we use. But generally, I found it rather difficult, I think, to ascertain specific language as it pertains, or even like empirical studies as it pertains to kind of drone use, just because of how new this technology is. There just hasn't been that kind of long series attitudinal studies over a certain amount of time. So I found that difficult to find. But in the report, we do speak to some issues of just like RTCC technology. But again, it's very specific, doesn't, I guess,
Yeah.
speak to the kind of this technology that we're speaking in the Berkeley context.
Yeah. I'm curious if you also, I mean, I would assume like speaking with officers who are operating the drones and just involved in this, in the programs in San Francisco, and then what's the other town where you have the data from? Down south, right?
Chula Vista?
Chula Vista, yeah. I mean, did you consider, or did you speak with any of the officers there as far as like how it's changed their policing practices?
No, but if we have maybe 3 more months, that's something we could do. Yeah, I guess just because of the time and the resources in the last month, it was a bit difficult, but I think that would be fantastic, sort of like it's a long-term study and analysis.
Yep.
Yeah, it's also like anecdotal, and I think the benefit of what they've tried to do is that it's quantitative, so.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of anecdotal stuff in here too, so it kind of cuts both ways. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jose, can you make sure that you get my memo as well?
Yes, we were actually coordinating behind the scenes.
Oh, okay, cool. Thank you.
But okay, thank you, team.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank
All
you.
right,
Thank you so much.
let's go
Bye.
back through to our agenda, I think on item 5.
So good news is it's relatively brief, OEP staff report this week. As the board may be aware, council met for a closed session on Monday to discuss the process for the appointment of an interim director formally, as well as initiating the process for the permanent director. Out of that reporting, we learned that the mayor, as well as council members Luna Barra and Humbert, will be a part of the committee will be leading the efforts in the recruitment process. From the information I have, I know the city is also looking for a recruiter who's going to essentially be guiding or structuring the stakeholder outreach, including both internal and external, and setting up the different panels that will help develop the criteria for the hiring of the new director. In terms of the interim, the candidate has been identified. The goal is to have that person in the office by April is the goal. But again, that's sort of just with the limited information I have at this time and the anticipated timeline. So come April, we should have an interim director for a few months while that hiring process moves forward. And that's the only report I have for now.
Okay. Chair and board member reports. I don't have anything.
I don't have anything.
Okay, subcommittee reports. I think rather than going through the list, Jose, if there's anything that anybody needs to report on can we just have that in affirmative?
Mhm.
I don't have anything to report. I'm trying to schedule the homeless encampment meeting.
Great.
Anything else? Okay. So let's move on to item 9C.
Okay. So item 9C, first, we just want to acknowledge that this one was a policy review that came into our office last year. I think the date's November. The reason it took so long to come to the board, the standing rules require that we bring it within 30 days or the nearest meeting if you can't make it within that. As part of our intake process, both for our investigations and our policy review, we always contact the person that submitted the complaint first to confirm that they intended to submit a policy review, or if they were intending to submit a complaint, that it was filled out on the appropriate form. We did so, we made initial contact, but as we described in our memo, we were unable to reach them for a few times and the contact just wasn't consistent. We were originally gonna present this for just a rejection based on the fact that we couldn't contact them. At the end, we were able to establish that contact. They confirmed that they wanted to do a policy review. So we assessed the incident that they identified more thoroughly before bringing it to the board. Our recommendation, and I lost my page here, but our recommendation, which can be found on page 76 of the packet, which we presented at the last meeting, is to not accept the policy complaint at this time. The subject of the complaint revolves around officers using their cell phones, whether in city vehicles. We reviewed the existing policy. There's clear, the language in it, at least from our initial assessment, was that there's already safeguards and provision in place that would prevent a concern that the community member had given the circumstances. So the first reason just being current existing policy coverage. The second, based on the data that we have and what we've seen throughout the years, both in complaints and personnel reviews, there isn't an immediate pattern or practice that we identified to justify initiating a review in consideration of the limited resources that the board currently has. Again, the full memo is on page 76. That's just sort of the recap of the incident. We did ask the complainant if they wanted to come by, provide their input, and we didn't really get a response to that. So that's sort of where we're at in the situation.
I move staff's recommendation.
A second.
Okay, Vice Chair Wilson,
Yeah.
Board Member Wells.
Yes.
And Board Member Turco.
Yes.
All right, the motion carries. Okay. So now we can move on to item 9D. This particular outline, and there isn't any particular action that we're requesting the board, it's more of an informational item. This is based on our current resources, which, given recent circumstances, have changed a bit in terms of our staffing. But these are sort of the priorities that we have for the current year, with the assumption that our staffing levels are gonna remain the same. That was lovely. Assuming that our staffing levels were gonna remain the same. One of the projects that we have is a partnership with Social Sector Solutions with the Haas School of Business up at UC Berkeley, which is helping us develop what we call sort of a pulse survey. That's intended to, one, get community input on public safety within the city and our public safety practices, as well as ways that the board and the ODPA can improve to better serve the community. They're not helping us implement the survey, they're sort of helping us along with McKinsey consultants to develop a long-term strategy for outreach and getting critical feedback. And then, of course, we'd be prioritizing core oversight functions, which would be our complaints, our complainer/personnel intake process, as well as the continuous support that we bring to board meetings, and the recurring items such as like the annual report and mandated policy reviews such as surveillance technologies we've been discussing, and other areas that come up. So that's the short version of that memo. I'm happy to take any questions. And of course, as we transition into new leadership, this might change throughout the year.
I'm just curious, do we have an update on the timeline for the annual report?
So we have been working with staff, given just the timelines for even submission to council, it wouldn't be in March. So we as staff are still pushing to get a draft of that report within the next month.
To the board.
To the board.
Okay, okay. Any other board member questions on the ODP website? Let's go to 9E. Policy 351.
Yes. And the notes for this one regarding the council's requests. Yeah, so policy 351 is the update to fixed video surveillance cameras, which is related to the block cameras that the city's proposing. This update was primarily in response to the July 22nd action that council took, where they approved the acquisition report and the related policies on a conditional basis. Those conditions, which were 3 general topics, is one, that the policies include a biannual audit reporting mechanism to be able to provide oversight of how those cameras are being used. There is also an adoption of various recommendations that the board had proposed, including language to various sections, references to the sanctuary city ordinance, and adding a new section to the policy requiring BPD to observe certain safeguards with respect to surveillance camera data within the AOPR policy. And then, of course, there's the additional safeguards, which just included making sure that they're compliant, that the contracts are compliant with city ordinances and all the relevant municipal codes and such that council and the PAB are concerned with. So that's the overview. The draft that we were presented has the red lines of what that language is being presented. The board doesn't have to take action on it today, but it is a part of that package that's going to be going to council on March 24th. So the last day to take action on the language being presented or to provide additional recommendations would be the next meeting on March 11th.
I just have a question. In the written public comment we received, there's a reference to new camera sites beyond those enumerated in 351.3.1. Is staff familiar with the request to add sites at Durant and Telegraph, University and Shattuck College in Ashby and Fourth and Hearst?
I don't have the acquisition report that was originally presented from my original from my immediate recollection. Those updates were presented in that surveillance acquisition report.
Okay,
That was presented by council initially and that the board reviewed.
okay. So we're thinking that when council takes this up on March 24th, it's gonna be with the additional sites as well.
Correct.
Okay, and then I just kind of noticed that these revisions explicitly allow the department to integrate the technology, whereas previously was prohibited.
Mhm.
And it limits that integration to nothing beyond what's allowed by city law or department policy. So we once again have a problem of a policy that on its face is not clear, or we can't hold anybody accountable to this policy because it's referencing other city laws or department policies in terms of the limitation on data integration. So that's one thing that I would want to make a comment on back to the city council. The other is there is no longer an explicit ban on sharing data with federal immigration enforcement officials. It says unless required by federal law. And then there is this limitation on providing video recordings to law enforcement agencies in other states if it is for the purpose of criminalizing reproductive rights or the provision of the receipt of gender affirming care. But I would think we would similarly want to prohibit sharing of data with other states for federal immigration enforcement purposes. Meaning if there's another state that's actively cooperating with ICE, I think we would not want to give them the data either. So these are some of my comments that I'm sharing. The other thing is, if you look at this, this is section 3.351.6. The chief is simply required to report any request from federal immigration authorities within 10 days of receiving the request. So there's no action required, just reporting it. So that seems very weak to me as a protective provision. And then it says, if in the event a federal agency is given the data, is given in the passive voice, I don't know by who, all that's required is we have to give notice to council, et cetera, within 72 hours. So you can give the data and just give a notice 3 days later. The last comment I have on this is the audit provision is not exactly independent. It's an office within the police department. and the audit goes up to the chief before it's published. The police department office that's conducting the audit reports up to the chief, so. That is another comment. So I'm sharing my comments with the board because next week we would have to vote on this. And I would propose some language to address some of these issues that I've raised.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have comments on this policy? Or if not, we can move on and we'll vote on it next time.
I don't have any comments, Chair.
Okay, so let's go to item 9F.
Yeah. So this item is regarding the resolution restricting the use of air supporting canine units. And the updates that are currently being considered by the Public Safety Policy Committee. As the board may recall at their last meeting, the board approved a letter asking the Public Safety Committee for additional time to consider the proposal. Similarly, this item, in terms of the deadline, doesn't require action today, but can be taken on March 11th. The only uncertainty we have is that we don't know if the Public Safety Policy Committee is going to meet in late March or at their next regular meeting in April. There was an expressed desire to meet in late March. And the reason that they're not meeting in their typical days because of the religious holiday that conflicts with the dates where they're looking to reschedule. So the safe date would be March 11th in terms of the deadline. But as we covered in our memo last week, the last meeting, the policy, or rather the resolution is not necessarily proposing changes to everything. The main thing is the reporting or the approval process, which would go from requiring approval from the city manager or the chief of police in the city manager's absence to being a BPD approved policy. I don't recall exactly when the hiring structure specifically it would require, but it would just require a notice that an after action report that mutual aid was acquired. The second biggest change is really just from the permitted uses. As currently in place, there's like very limited times for which a helicopter could be used. In the new proposal, it broadens the different circumstances that mutual aid and the use of helicopters can be used. So it's really just those two sections. The use of canines still prohibited as currently stands in terms of like First Amendment demonstrations and such. So that part of the policy remains unchanged. But we're bringing this back just to get guidance in terms of what the board would need or if there's specific stance. Again, we don't have a proposal within this packet. We just provided a comparison at last week's meeting, the last meeting, where we just compare this, but I'm not sure if there's any immediate questions or requests for staff of information that the board would be interested in.
I don't have any immediate question, but I do sort of have this. I think I have a larger question that just says like there is a trend of this expansion of police authority and power in ways that crime statistics don't suggest is needed. I mean, if the resolution was passed in 1982 to restrict helicopters and K9 units, then in the last 43 years, what has transpired in crime trends that would suggest that these types of tools are needed now?
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and think about like, this is what, it's like an avalanche of stuff that's been coming our way, the tear gas, we're bringing back tear gas, we want to stop reporting on pepper spray. Or we want to not have to get city manager authority to deploy canines and helicopters. We want drones, we want more fixed cameras, we want ALP license. So it's expansion of police power. And it's unclear why in this community.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to look at, if I was to ask the question from an objective perspective, it's just like, what are the crime trends over the last 43 years that would suggest that this resolution needs to be rescinded? What crime has taken place that access to helicopters and police canine units, even if they're being borrowed from neighboring jurisdictions, is needed for the type of crime that is taking place in Berkeley?
Well, this isn't, so right now they can do it, they just have to get city manager approval to do it, right? And this rescission of the policy eliminates that requirement to get city manager approval. So it's really like, what has happened that makes it so that, you know, you've got such like high risk, high velocity, high volume activity going on in the city of Berkeley that you don't have time to get the city manager's approval. It is
Yeah,
confusing. I don't.
it's, yeah.
I mean, I
Or-
suspect, what's that?
Or the other question I would have is, what is it that? What sort of crime scenario would be needed for a helicopter that a drone would be able to solve for?
I don't know. I mean, another theory is just that this is something that BPD has wanted rescinded rightly or wrongly for some time, and the council makeup is such that they're able to do it now.
I'm sure with all of
Yeah.
that stuff. That
Right.
is why we're seeing an expansion of police power and budget under this council. So I don't know. Okay, well, it sounds like we don't necessarily need anything from staff. I don't know, I would say if you have time to ask for any deployment statistics from the department on air support or canines in the last 43 years.
I do.
No, we didn't
That's
ask
what I would
43
ask.
years, but
I would
like,
like
you know,
to
the
know.
last 5 years or something.
Yes.
Okay. So we have a packed agenda for the 11th. We have to vote on drones.
Should go on vacation.
We have this, we have 351. We have the master services agreement with Block that was referred to earlier, and this other, the commercial camera streaming item.
Yes.
Yeah, so let's try not to add anything else to the agenda. Okay, let's go to our last open session, item 9G, recap of the annual retreat. So this is a memo that was handed out to you, I believe. I just got it back yesterday. And really all this attempts to do is to document what we did at the retreat. You guys know what we did. We did come up with kind of an initial list of priorities, which is starts on page 2, item 3. I think my main takeaway here is we need to winnow this down because we have 4 people on this board. And we're not gonna do that tonight. We're not gonna do it on March 11th. So we need to just find a reasonable meeting date that's not at the end of 2026. To just have a conversation about it, you know, our priorities. So I don't know when it's gonna be, but hopefully we can get that done in April.
Yeah, and if it helps, just for context. Great question about the deadline coming, because in terms of the commissioner's manual, the requirement to submit a work plan to council, we've been doing at the start of, or at least last year, we did it towards the beginning of the year. Which was actually a few months early from the typical requirement, which is usually the start of the fiscal year. When we're supposed to be turning in a work plan for the following year to council.
Are we on a fiscal year with council or calendar year? Sorry for the work plan.
It's my immediate recollection, not confirmed, it's that it's a fiscal year work plan. So we do have that flexibility. I totally agree, even just in the way that staff could support, after March would be ideal. But in April would be, I think, reasonable to create.
Okay, I mean, that's good to know. I thought we were doing it for the calendar year. If you could confirm that, the work plan deadline, and then for some reason, I don't have our meetings in April on my calendar. When are our April meetings?
They are in. Except the last page in the packet. So we have one meeting on the 22nd.
Oh, only one. So why don't we put this on for April 22nd? Unless we find out that we need to do something sooner.
Okay.
Okay, and if folks could just read this, you'll also send this out to, I guess it's just the chair. We'll make sure we, okay. All right, with that, I think we can go to public comment.
Okay. We'll start with those physical present first. As a reminder, speakers are generally allotted up to 3 minutes. So maybe a lot less time with our main speakers. If you comment on any matter The board jurisdiction at this time, except confidential personnel matters. So we have our first in-person speaker. One moment while I get the timer up on the screen. When you're ready, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your continuing work. I know this is very difficult. There's only 4 of you. And you feel like no one's listening to you. But nonetheless, you're doing really good work. I appreciate that. This is a really excellent report. I wish that city council would take the time that you took to this report. And I hope that at least some of what's presented in here gets through the city council. Because it's based on, let's look at the facts, the reasoning, the logic, rather than the suppositions of some terrible thing could happen, and then we could do this if we had that. It's really, really good analysis, and you've done very good analysis as well. I'll just make a couple of remarks about the police push for more power, fewer restrictions on them. I have gone to the last 2 public safety committee meetings. The rooms have been full, and Zoom also. It's been 40 or 50 people speaking, members of the public speaking, and every single one says, don't do this. This is not in response to people from the public wanting this. In past situations of this sort, there's been at least a couple of people who've said, oh, I'm so worried about crime, we need this. No one like that has come to these meetings. I'm sure somebody will at some point, but it's overwhelming. These are things the public is not asking for. I want to point out that in the police, talking about they will give up 6 positions in order to get this equipment instead. For years, they have not been able to recruit people to fill all the positions they have. So they are not currently spending the money for these 6 officers because they don't have the officers to spend it on. So in terms of this tight budget situation, what they're talking about to me appears to be, we'll give up money that hasn't been spent for money that definitely will be spent. And we're gonna go into this equipment instead. So I just wanted to point out those things. I'm not more just a little point about the police dogs, because they so often talk about this could happen or that can happen. I don't know if you saw, there's an article in the paper, Fremont, which has canine units, recently sent its canine unit to a situation, and the dog bit one of the police officers, who was so startled by that he shot the suspect, sending the suspect to the hospital with some serious injuries. So in terms of, let's look at what could possibly happen, bringing dogs to a situation could really not make things better. So just noticing that. Okay, thank you so much for your
Thank
work.
you, thank you. Good
Thank
night.
you. I'll now move on to our virtual attendees. George Littman, you've been granted permission to speak. 3 minutes on the screen now.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to comment on the last conversation where you were talking about asking the city manager's approval for, I guess it was helicopters and dogs. I thought that was a very helpful explanation of one point of view, which is, yes, it's a through line that's more about more police powers. But there's another through line which has to do with the denial of police accountability. And I feel like taking the city manager out of the loop, that's another aspect of civilian oversight, along with the long-term underappointment of this body, the denial of your charter rights to data, um, bypassing the fine recommendations that you give, which is what caused the recent resignations, one of the major pieces, the frustration with that, and I would say uh, the lack of a permanent director. All of that is a frontal attack, and it's a growing attack on the viability of both the organizations, the PAB and the ODPA, and um, let's remember that it's not just about growing the strength of the police department, but it's getting rid of anyone who raises a question. And accountability is so important nationally, and I don't want to make a comparison, but we're in an era where oversight and accountability and transparency is passé. And I sure hope we don't go that route. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, Vice Chair, there are no additional hands raised.
All right, with that, we will continue into closed session.
Okay. Audio and video recording will stop. We'll be returning for our closed session report. We are back in open session. You can start with item 12, announcement of closed session actions. During their closed session, the board took action on 2 cases, one administrative closure and one findings and recommendations report, and accepted staff's recommendations for both. Vice Chair, we could proceed to the adjournment.
All right, I move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, without any objections, the meeting is adjourned.